Now that you have seen some basic usage, let's sit down and look at one of the ways that we store data in PHP, called variables. So let's take a look at variables. Variables always begin with a $sign. Then that $sign can be followed by an underscore, or a series of letters, or a series of letters, underscores, and numbers combined. So now that you've seen how a basic code block works in the previous example by simply echoing hello world, let's see this in a real-world scenario. And the way we're going to do that is by introducing PHP variables. We're going to open up another code block at the top here of the document. Since this is not actually shown to the user until after it is interpreted by the PHP interpreter on the server, we can add code at the top that's not displayed, that's just processing information. We're going to do that by opening up the same way we did in the previous example with the PHP code block opening, which is $PHP. We close the code block a few lines down with the question mark followed by the greater than symbol. So anything inside of this code block will be interpreted as PHP. So to create a variable, we'll start with the $sign symbol and then the name of the variable. In this case, we're actually going to set Mike the Frog's name. So we'll use the variable and we'll call it name. Then to assign a value to that variable, we follow it with a space, then an equal sign, then another space, and then two double quotes, which tells us it's going to be a string. Then to end the statement inside of PHP, to say we're done with this line, we're going to hit semicolon. This is how we're going to end every line in PHP. We'll get into PHP statements a little further on, but for now, just add a semicolon to the end of the line to say that we're ending the statement. Now head back into our double quotes, and we'll put the string in Mike the Frog. We'll hit save, and now we've got a variable called name that contains the value Mike the Frog. This is great for storing, but what about for recalling? In order to recall the variable name, we need to go down to anywhere that we would use Mike the Frog and replace it with our name variable. Let's start with the h1 tag that we modified earlier. We'll go down and remove Mike Frog from the earlier example and open up another PHP code block. And then close the code block. And inside, we'll use the previously used echo command and then simply put our variable name, which is $name. Now, on a single line of PHP, you don't actually have to put a semicolon to tell it it's the end of the statement. If you use multiple lines in PHP, then we have to use a semicolon. So in this case, we're good right where we are right now. So go ahead and save your file, and then head over to the eye icon to preview. So here in our preview, you see it still says Mike the Frog. Well, how do we know that we've done anything different? Or what's the purpose? Or what's the real reason that we would use a variable, say, instead of just the string Mike the Frog? Well, let's say Mike the Frog doesn't like to go by Mike the Frog. Let's say he just wants to be called Mike. Well, that's easy. Let's switch back over to our code and modify our variable. Instead of saying Mike the Frog, let's just get rid of the frog. So it says Mike. Save our file, switch back over, and refresh our preview. So now you see it just says Mike. If you notice, in the top, our title bar, it also still says Mike the Frog. Well, we could either go around our code changing it manually each time, or we simply copy and paste the exact code block from before into anywhere it says Mike the Frog. So here we have Mike the Frog from the title, and we had Mike the Frog here in our h1 tag. Also, notice we had it as an alt for our image, so we can also just place it right here. So hit save, go back over to our preview, and hit refresh. So now you see the profile just says Mike on the tab, also Mike here, and if you view the source, you'll be able to see that the alt also says just Mike. So maybe now you can start to see the power of using variables in our code. So let's switch back over to our code and do a few more changes using variables. Let's say we want to update our location. So we'll do another variable called location. Start with the $sign and then the name location, then the equal sign, and then two double quotes, and then close it with a semicolon. Now, we could have called location anything. You could have said Mike or Chris or Tom or just any name at all. But we want to make sure we use valid, readable names so that if anybody comes back to modify the code, it's more readable and easy to update. So in this case, we'll leave his location the same to start with. So in this case, let's say Mike moved, and he moved from Portland to Orlando, Florida. So we'll say Orlando, comma, FL. Let's save this, but we still have to update it here. So what I'm going to do is delete this part, where it says Portland, Oregon, and put in a new code block and say echo location. Make sure you close your code block. Save your file. It's a single line, so we don't need a semicolon. Let's switch back over to our preview. Still says Portland, Oregon. Hit refresh. And now Mike has moved to Orlando, Florida. Another powerful thing inside of PHP is the order of operation on how things happen. So for instance, everything goes from top to bottom in a PHP file as it's being interpreted. So name, Mike, is interpreted first, then it goes down to the next line and reads the following statement, location, Orlando, Florida. So let's say that Mike decided he wanted to go by Mike the Frog sometimes. The way we can do that is we'll create another variable name. We'll call it full name. Well, instead of cramming it all together, we want to use underscores like we saw in the video as a standard practice for a space. So full underscore name, and then we'll set that equal to another string, except the full name, which is Mike the Frog. Close it with a statement. So now we could change it by going and copying full name here and replacing it everywhere that you would see name. So in this case, you would see we'd replace name here, we'd replace name here, and also here in the alt tag. But since we have order of operation working for us, we could simply reassign the variable name. So here's name, and we could set it equal to Mike the Frog as a full string, or we could use the variable full name to set name. So we'll simply say name is equal to full name. Close that with a semicolon, save our file, and let's switch and look at the preview. So now Mike is Mike the Frog everywhere. So you can see it's here in the title, Mike the Frog, it's here in the header, and it's also in the alt tag, which we can see if we inspect our element. So you see here is Mike the Frog. All of this by simply changing one or two lines of code in our PHP code block at the top of our file.